everybody, and welcome again to Nerd to the Third Power, one-stop shop for all things nerdy and awesome. I'm your host and master of ceremonies, Dr. Gonzo. With me, as always, in this epic quest of nerdiness is our resident anime goddess, the Cat. Cat, how you doing this week?
Tired, but alive, so there's always that.
Okay, all right. And also with us this week is our other co-pilot, Skyblaze. Skyblaze, how you doing?
I had a migraine yesterday and I've been to a party today, so it's been an interesting couple of days.
Odd, normally those two things go the other way around.
It's funny that, isn't it? It's like I had a reverse hangover.
Reverse hangover.
You decided to get the hangover out of the way before the party. Okay, all right. Okay, I see. All right, we got a fun show for you guys tonight. Tonight we're doing something that I've been really looking forward to, and something that I find really interesting. We're going to be doing a look back on the first year of the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo's new console, which has seemed to be shaking everything up. And so we're going to take a look back at the first year's performance and give our wild and baseless speculation on its future. So, but of course, there is an order of business that we have to follow, and we are going to start, as always, with the random topic of the week. And last week I brought up that I had purchased some dental hooks from my dentist to use for cleaning my game controllers. So we asked our listeners, what's the weirdest thing that you have ever repurposed towards nerdy ends? And perhaps not surprisingly, a lot of cosplayers have responded. We've also got some responses from some creative tabletop players. So we've got a few here. So the first one here comes from Ray, and he says, I found in a junkyard an old prosthetic leg that I repurposed to use as a Viking drinking horn for a cosplay.
Oh, good God. What?
I got nothing.
Wow.
Just holy shit, dude.
So, I imagine it's one of those ones that just slips over those older ones that just slips over the stump. But that hopefully the reason why it was in a junkyard was because the previous owner did not need it and not because they lost it. So, okay, next one here. This one comes from Michelle, and she said that she found a pair of her grandmother's old earrings, steel earrings, that just happened to have 20 sides. So she took a micro Dremel, carved numbers into the sides, and made them into a pair of D20 dice.
That's pretty cool.
Okay. And let's see here now. Robert writes in here that he used to work at a car shop, and he would take old tires, cut them up into squares, and use them to construct buildings and terrain for his Dungeons and Dragons group. So I imagine
that's clever.
I wonder what he did to get the stench of road rubber out of those tire bits. But my personal favorite story here comes from Sam, and he writes, I lost my left arm in Iraq, and when I came back, I found it very difficult to paint my minis for my Dungeons & Dragons group, until I found my dad's old vise, which I have repurposed to hold the minis as I paint them with my remaining arm. So that's really cool. Thank you, Sam, for your service.
That's very clever. Yeah, nice.
So it just goes to show... It just goes to show that that nerds can find a use for just about anything. So so we love your responses, and love hearing about the creativity of the geek community. And so with that, we're going to segue now into Ask a Geek, and we got a bunch of questions here. And first question here is for you, Kat, and this one comes from Mark. And he asks, since you've gotten real big into Critical Role, are there any other Dungeons & Dragons shows or comics that you're into?
Oh, goodness. I did just start listening to the new campaign of High Rollers, because I did see Mark Hulmes on Critical Role and said, oh God, that guy is really adorable. I need to watch more of him. And so he just had a new campaign that started. So I've been listening to that. And once I polish off Critical Role, I'll probably go back and listen to the first campaign of High Rollers and then make that my life for a little while. And I haven't been getting into any literature or anything because I'm so busy listening to podcasts. But I have been playing Pathfinder and D&D, so that's kind of eating up a lot of my time now, and I love it.
It does that.
Okay, and he has a secondary question for you and me, Skyblaze. Do we have any Dungeons and Dragons shows or comics that we could recommend to Kat?
I am so far behind with all of the things. Because I don't really read webcomics, which I know a lot of people are into, and a lot of people love the D&D themed ones. There's quite a few of them. The ones by Rich Burley were probably the best known. I don't really know anymore. I haven't role-played in quite a while now because I've been too busy, and well, prior to end of March this year, I was too ill for a good 6 months to actually do anything at all, so I'm a bit behind, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, I'm not real huge into tabletop gaming culture, but there is a comic book that I have been following for many years now that's centered around Dungeons and Dragons and the players thereof. Well, not specifically Dungeons and Dragons, because of copyright issues, but Knights of the Dinner Table is one that I recommend to anyone who's into who's into any kind of tabletop gaming entertainment. It centers around several groups of gamers who play a D&D analog called Hackmaster. And what I love about it...
No, Hackmaster exists.
Yeah, they eventually... The publishing company, Kenzer & Company, actually made it into a game, but that's where it came from, was from the comic book series.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And and it's funny, if you're familiar with the comic, and you go and you look at the rules material and background material for the game, you actually see that a lot of in-jokes from the comics actually made it into the game. It's hilarious. But I love how it's just a one long affectionate send up of tabletop gaming culture, and it's one of those things that its conceit is that it's basically based on the author and creator's experiences with the game community of their hometown of Muncie, Indiana, which has apparently become a bit of a minor tourist attraction for D&D players because of this comic. But I love that it manages to balance jokes about the game and also with the development of its characters. Like, for example, one of the characters is a guy named Crutch, who he's an ex-convict. When we first meet him, he's just gotten out of prison, and he kind of stumbles into Muncie's gaming community. And over the course of about 5 years in the comic, you see him kind of go from, being this guy who's trying to leave his old life behind to actually getting his game master's credentials and starting to run games himself. And although he doesn't run any Hackmaster games, he runs this one that starts running this game that I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically a crime based game where people play as different gangs and compete against each other. And his table basically becomes a meat grinder where players will join his game and they'll die after like one session, but because they love it so much, they'll keep making up new characters and getting in line, getting on the waiting list for this game. So there's definitely a lot to love. So, Kat, if you're interested in a D&D culture comic book, Knights of the Dinner Table is one that I would highly recommend to you. And I actually have digital scans of the first, 100 issues if you're interested in picking it up.
Yeah, please recommend everybody pirate this perfectly nice comic that you just spent 5 minutes writing a glowing review of.
Some of the early stuff is out of print, last I heard.
I was actually just at a used gaming auction they have at my local comic book shop, and a ton of Knights of the Dinner Table went up for auction. Just tons of them.
Really? How much did they wind up?
How
much did they wind up going for?
A couple bucks. They would have like a stack of 10 of them, and they'd sell for like $7 or something.
But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Definitely recommend checking it out.
Order of the Stick was the Rich Burlew comics, whose name I was entirely forgetting earlier because my brain is fried.
Yes.
That would be the booze I had earlier.
Yes, that's another great one. So let's see here now. Next question here. Let's see. Here's one from Eric, and it is for Skyblaze and Kat. And his question is, if you could meet any one person as a guest at a con, who would it be? So this should be interesting because I'm pretty sure both of you have met just about everybody under the sun.
Lies.
God, Sir Patrick Stewart in a heartbeat. It's like, he's always the first person that comes to mind because he just seems like such a genuine, like, good human being, and I don't think he does cons at all. So
he does just once in a blue moon.
Yeah, so my chance of meeting him is like nil. And so I think that's why he's so high up on my scale of, oh god, I'd love to meet him because I know it's never gonna happen.
He once, like, randomly turned up at a tiny Star Trek convention that was like 500 people in Huddersfield because that's where he's from.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
He was just visiting family and was like, hello, I am randomly here. So everyone went, oh my god, what the hell?
So cool.
I'm trying to think. I always wanted to meet Leonard Nimoy, but unfortunately he's passed away now, so that's a bit of a shame. I'd quite like to meet Jim Cummings.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I bet he's loads of fun to hang out with. Because from several accounts I've heard, he is as mad as a brush.
Well, when you look at some of the characters he's voiced, that makes sense.
Indeed.
Okay. All right. Cool. And let's see. Is there one from me in here? I'm starting to feel a little left out here. Okay. Here's one from Megan, and she asked, have I ever been to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, or would I consider going to any retro gaming expos like Too Many Games? I've always wanted to go to Too Many Games, which I believe is held up in Pennsylvania. But I've just never had the opportunity to go, which is strange because all the retro game stores that I go to when I go on my hunts are in and around, the Philadelphia, Lancaster area. So it really wouldn't be too much of a further hop for me to go to Too Many Games. Portland Retro Gaming Expo I'd love to go to as well because a lot of the retro YouTubers that I follow are in the Seattle area, and so they wind up going. And it's basically the only reason I would ever go back to Portland. They know why. This is, I haven't just had part of the thing that really stops me from going, not just to retro cons, but any con in general, is the fact that most of them tend to be on the weekends, which is when I work. Literally my work shift is 12 hours Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So, in order for me to go to a con, I literally have to take an entire work week off. So, maybe if some madman out there conceives of more conventions that take place during the Monday to Friday time frame, I'd be a little more active in the con scene. But unfortunately, my work schedule precludes me from going to many cons. So, sad face.
Don't you get vacation?
Yeah, but I've already spent my vacation this year. That was when I took that epic vacation in May. I was basically me burning through all my accrued vacation time.
Oh, well, that's your own fault.
Yeah, and then the week after I use it, I find out that Too Many Games is coming up, and I'm like, oh god damn, if I just waited. Oh no, it wasn't Too Many Games. It was Awesome Con, which is actually a local con to the Baltimore area, the Baltimore, Washington D.C. area. So, yeah. But I am going to try and make it out to a few retro expos next year. So.
You remember I mentioned that I tripped and bought a Saturn?
Oops.
Oh shit, I have bought a retro games console. My mistake. I went up, there's a tiny little retro store that's, it's a short bus ride from where I live. My husband spotted it, and I figured I'd go and check it out. It's like the Cave of Wonders from Aladdin, only geeky. They had
but the lamp.
They literally had. Do you remember the Sega Activator?
Oh, vaguely, yeah.
They had one of those. They had a Japanese copy of Nights into Dreams with the analog controller.
I guess that's hard to find over there?
Yes.
Okay, because
a little bit.
Okay, because we're practically tripping on Nights into Dreams and analog controllers over here.
We're bloody not. This is like the conversation we had about the 32X when I was like, fuck you!
You and I need to just start, just like at some point we need to sit down and start like comparing notes of what's common and rare over here versus what's common and rare over there, and just start working out like a trade deal or something.
Well, I picked up a copy of the Dreamcast Echo, Sonic Jam on the Saturn, which is another one that's not that common over here, but they were selling it for a reasonable price, so I was like, yoink. Virtua Fighter 2, Fighting Vipers, which is another one that's not that common here. It's relatively common, but it's not hugely common. I also got a copy of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles and the Link Cable.
Again, I kind of have to ask: is that really rare over there?
You never see them together is the problem, and even when the link cables do show up, they tend to disappear very quickly.
It's like magic.
Yeah, it's like all the nerds kind of sniff them out.
Again, we need to work out like a trade deal or something. But yeah, I've been to a few stores like that where it's like they have all this wonderful, amazing stuff. I want to give a shout out to a place that I go to in Philadelphia called Game Junkies, who the first time I went there, they had, right as you walk in the store on your left, they just have this big glass case with all of this like gaming memorabilia and minutia that I'd never seen anywhere before. Like, they have stuff like, promotional pins that like Blockbuster employees would wear during their video game championship thing in the early 90s. Or like, the t-shirts that were worn by game development teams or what have you. They had a copy of like the Little Samson instruction manual going for like $500. Little Samson, for those who don't know, is one of like the top 5 rarest NES games ever. Like a complete in-box copy will go for multiple thousands of dollars easily. And then the first time I went there, and I told the guy that I was making the rounds, just checking out a bunch of places. He was like, "Well, come on down to the basement and let me show you something." It was like a treasure trove of retro consoles, just like piles of Saturns and NESs and Genesises. Genesi? What's the proper plural for that?
Genesis?
Mega Drives.
Mega Drives.
And like, whole racks of like, I swear to God, it's like a mini armory in this one corner, just a bunch of Super Scope 6s and Lethal Enforcer light guns, racked up like a police armory. And I was like, well,
Did you do that thing from Hot Fuzz? By the power of Grayskull! Because you really should have.
No, because I've never actually seen Hot Fuzz, which I know needs to be fixed.
Oh, god damn it! What the hell is wrong with you?
Which, yeah, I know, but I've seen...
Fix this!
I know, which is weird, because I've seen the films on either side of it in the Cornetto trilogy. I've seen Shaun of the Dead, and we did a whole show on The World Is Ending.
World's End.
Yeah,
I was
World's
going
End.
to say, we're not even going to talk about how that's not even the right title of film.
So, but yeah, there's I love places like that just... That's the thing that I really love about retro game hunting. It's not just certain games themselves, but it's seeing the kind of weird odds and ends that a lot of stores have and put on display. Although sometimes I do weep when they have something that I really want for my own collection, but it's not for sale.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's all the Ask Geek questions that we have for this week. Thank you, as always, for sending them in. As always, you can send them to us through the email at drgonzo@nerdtothethirdpower.com. We love getting your questions, love reading them on the air, and so, yeah, get your questions in. You might get read on the show. And with that, we're going to segue right into our discussion topic this week, which is the Nintendo Switch 1 year later. We're going to take a look back at the first year of the Switch as a release console and kind of give our speculation on the future. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. And I'm going to open up by saying that I don't think I don't think there's been this much of a shakeup in terms of how a console has been received as this in a very long time. It seems like, we kind of expect the PS3s, the PS4s, the Xbox 360s, the Xbox Ones. We kind of expect those progressions. But Nintendo seemed to kind of come out of left field, even for them, with this.
Nintendo, to a certain extent, have always marched to the beat of their own drum, and have never been afraid of trying new, crazy things. Even going back to the 90s, the idea of a portable games console was kind of a bit of a revelation. They were going back to the Game Boy.
Yeah,
so they've always done things a bit differently.
Yeah, and that's served them well, and it's also been, and it's also gotten them into, I don't want to say trouble, but there've been times where it hasn't really panned out. Those of you in the older crowd will remember the Virtual Boy, but in more recent memory, we had the Wii U, which was on its own, just an evolution of the Wii. And I think that kind of was to its detriment, because while Wii was very successful with the casual gaming audience, the real hardcore crowd, and to kind of a slightly less extent, developers and publishers in general kind of looked at the Wii with a bit of disdain, and so the Wii U was kind of painted by original sin when it came out. We didn't see a lot of glowing press for the Wii U, so the Switch was kind of going to be the make or break moment for Nintendo after the I don't want to say bad, because I love my Wii U. I love the games I have for the Wii U, but it didn't exactly light the world on fire. So Nintendo really needed a big win with the Switch. And what I think is surprising a lot of people is how big a win it's turned out to be so far. But we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves. So let's talk about how we came to approach the Wii U. So Skyblaze, let's start with you. How did you come to into contact, I guess, with the Nintendo Switch, and how it entered your world?
Well, I'd heard about it for quite a while casually. It's like, I know a lot of people were getting very excited about it, and it was like, my response to it was like, that's interesting. I wasn't hugely excited about it at first, mostly because the big title that was on it was Zelda Breath of the Wild. I am not a huge Zelda fan. I like Zelda, I don't dislike Zelda, I'm not involved in the fandom, I don't get hugely excited about the games. The last Zelda game I finished was Ocarina of Time. Just to give you some perspective on this. So, I didn't get hugely excited by it, and I never bought a Wii either, and I still don't own a Wii U. The Wii we have in the house actually belongs to my husband. My console of choice for that generation was a PS3.
Yeah, I seem to recall that you were more into the handheld side of Nintendo up to this point.
Yes, I was, because I had the DS, I had the 3DS. I enjoyed those games. I enjoyed playing them on the go. And I looked at the Switch, especially when they released the first images of the Joy-Cons, and when it was in tablet mode, I was like, is that going to be comfortable to hold? Because of how kind of asymmetrical it was, and I was like, is that going to be ergonomic? I don't know. So I was a bit kind of, there was a lot of question marks for me over what are they doing? Especially when it then emerged that they were going to be relying exclusively on cartridges and online distribution. I was like, you tried this once before, Nintendo. It was called the Nintendo 64. That did not go that well for you. So I was a bit looking a bit side-eye at it. And then, as I mentioned, I got very, very ill, and I had to go to the hospital for quite a while. And my boss at work he was a huge Switch evangelist, and was like, get a Switch. It's so you won't be bored, get a Switch. It was like, alright, shut up, alright, fine. And I got a Switch, and we got Axiom Verge and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with it, so I could go into hospital and then go into my recovery without being so bored that I was climbing the walls. And it worked.
So once you came into possession of the Switch, I guess what the question I have is, what was the moment that you realized that this was going to be, just a viable platform, or maybe something a little more special? Or I guess I should say, was there one specific moment?
I think it was a slow realization. The fact that I clocked that it was using a USB-C connector was brilliant, because that's the same one that my phone uses. So it was like, swap out the phone. I didn't need to piss about with multiple cables. I could just take the cable out of my phone, plug it into the Switch. There we go. Charging problem solved. And also, how seamlessly it does the Switch thing that it's named for, from being a tablet to being on the TV. You literally just slide it in and activate the Joy-Cons. Job done. I don't know how they did that, but it was so... The software and hardware that does that, mwah! Gorgeous engineering. Very nice. It's also fairly sturdy for what it is.
Indeed. Although there are some hardware issues that have been cropping up over the past couple weeks, but we'll get into that later down the line. For me, the revelation came from the games, from the software. There were 3 games that convinced me that the Switch was going to be something special. 2 of which are going to be obvious. The third may surprise you. The 2 obvious ones are Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, which are both phenomenal games, which I've already clocked hundreds and hundreds of hours on. And, you know, you look at those like, okay, yeah, you expect those to be good because they're Nintendo first-party titles, and Nintendo always brings their A game, mostly brings their A game with their first-party titles. But do you want to take a stab at guessing what the third title was?
I don't know. Pokemon Quest? I have no idea.
No. It was actually Doom. It was Doom.
What?
It was Doom 2016. Now, which I bought originally for the Switch to laugh at it because, all right, here let me set some context here. When Doom 2016 first came out on the PC, I was hyped as hell. I call it the most expensive game in my Steam library because I bought a 4K television and an NVIDIA GeForce 1080 graphics card to the total tune of about $1,500 just to play this game. And it was a gorgeous experience, and it was very, cutting edge game visually. So when I found out that it was getting a port on the Switch, I was like, okay, this is going to be dumb. It's going to be stupid. It's going to look like ass. It's going to play like ass. Let's just pick it up to laugh at it. And I was amazed as I was playing the Switch version of Doom that while I could see that there had been cuts in the visuals department to make the game perform on this lower end hardware, I was still having just as much fun playing Doom on the go on the Nintendo Switch as I had been playing it on my PC at home. And I was like, okay, wow, I've really underestimated what this thing can do. I mean, I'm having pretty much the same experience with this game on this console in my downtime at work as I was on my PC at home. So, maybe there's something more to this. Because I knew I was going to buy a Nintendo Switch from word go because, I'm a Nintendo fanboy. The Nintendo console will always be the first console I buy in any new generation. But it was at that point where I was playing Doom 2016 on the Switch that I was like, okay, there's something more here. And we're starting to see in recent months, sort of industry as a whole kind of coming around to this realization that the Switch might be a bit of a game changer. Skyblaze, you and I were talking before the show about how Squaresoft seems rather surprised at how well Octopath Traveler has been doing since its release, which was just last Friday. This game's not even a week old, and Square Enix is already kind of shocked at how well it's doing.
Yeah, and I was saying to you, I have to wonder if that's because people don't take the Switch that seriously. And I have to wonder if that's kind of a hangover from looking at how well the Wii U didn't do. Because when the video games industry has this terrible, terrible habit of looking at data points in isolation rather than looking at an entire data set. And what I mean by that is that they will focus on X is like Y, and Y didn't do very well, so X won't do very well either. Completely ignoring the fact that Y maybe was rushed to release, or maybe had a critical flaw, and that's why it didn't do very well. As opposed to X, which is a different product which does a different thing, or isn't rushed to release, or doesn't have that flaw.
And I think you also make comparisons to the PS Vita.
Yes, because again, on paper, the Vita and the Wii U both do similar things, and on paper, the Switch seems to be trying to do that same thing as well. You're trying to take a more powerful console on the go with you. And I can see why, when viewed in isolation, people would look at that and go, that's not going to do very well, because historical data says consoles of this hybrid type don't do very well. Ignoring the fact that technology has changed and tastes have changed, and there, as I said about the engineering that's gone into the Switch is actually very impressive for what it is.
Indeed. Now, this is a question that I kind of wanted to bring in because this is a comparison that I have heard many times, and I don't necessarily agree with it myself, but it's definitely an interesting interpretation. I want to get your thoughts on it. But I've heard it said by a number of people that they feel that the Switch is closer in nature to a tablet than a game console. Have you heard this sentiment before, and what are your thoughts on it?
I've heard this said before, and I can see where they're coming from the form factor, if nothing else. If you take the Switch out of the dock without attaching the Joy-Cons, that's a tablet. It has a touch screen, it has that kind of touch interface, it does a lot of the things that a tablet can do, but very simplified. It's only when you attach the Joy-Cons that it really becomes a console. So I can see where they're coming from, but and especially when you start looking at the hardware, because it's powered by a system on a chip, the sort of thing that does run tablets. So, on the other hand, it has a dedicated GPU, graphics processing unit, for those who are not familiar with the silly flange, and it has a lot more RAM power than you would generally expect from graphical RAM power than you would generally expect from a tablet machine. And it has the dedicated controllers, which usually have to do a lot of pissing about, I speak from experience, to get even a Bluetooth controller paired with a tablet. And when we get right down to it, the hardware is one thing, the software is another, and it's the software that makes something what it is.
Yeah, and it's amazing how, I mean, because let's be honest, I mean, as far as in terms of raw power, the Switch is the small kid on the block. You stack it up against an Xbox One or a PS4, even just the basic forms of those consoles, and it's going to get creamed on just the raw power. But like I said, here I was with Doom. I mean, I wasn't excited about Skyrim running on the Switch. Because as we established, I can't play Skyrim unless I've modded it to hell. B, Skyrim 7 was at the time of its release for the Switch, was already 6 years old. If you can't run a game that, from a generation ago on your new console, then you've failed miserably. So I was not at all excited about Skyrim coming to Switch. But here was Doom 2016, a game that came out last year, was bleeding edge, and I was having the same experience with it on the Switch as I was on the PC. I mean, that I'm prepared to call that a miracle of software engineering. Point blank, period, end of discussion. And the fact that Bethesda went back and repeated it almost exactly with Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. We're seeing games coming to the Switch from developers that basically just would look at the Wii and Wii U and just laugh. So now I'm kind of wondering, do you think maybe that the industry stance towards Nintendo is kind of starting to turn around with the Switch?
I think it might be starting to. The games industry as a whole, there are exceptions, but as a whole tends to be a bit Leviathan-like, and it takes a long time for it to pivot and change direction. On the other hand, there has been a bit of a movement within certain aspects of the game industry that I happen to know about just because of the work I do, and we have to talk to developers on a regular basis, and I have to deal with interviews and all sorts of things, and press releases and so on and so forth. There has been a slight alteration in the way that some developers are approaching creating some games. Namely that there's been a movement towards making what I'm going to call neater code, cleaner code. And this ties in very well to having to cram it onto a cartridge. Because we know if you look at, if you get a disc game, as soon as you put it into your console, it's going to have to do a X number of gig update, right?
Yeah.
Do you have to do that with Switch games? Not as often, as far as I can tell.
I was surprised actually when I put in Octopath Traveler, and it prompted me to put in an update.
Yeah, I know, right?
And then I was further surprised by how quick that update was. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. Like I haven't experienced it so much with the PS4, but certainly with the PS3. I would have to I'd pop in a disc after buying a game brand new, and then it would be like 20 minutes before I could start playing it.
Yeah.
Because I had to wait for this thing to download an update. Now, that's less of an issue with the PS4 because it lets you start running the game off the disc while the update is installing.
Yeah. But you don't even have to do that with the Switch.
Yeah, with the Switch, you can just tell it, okay, I know this update is here. I'll download it later.
Yeah, because there's been this movement towards giving you a complete product. And I don't know if that's Nintendo that's enforcing this, or if there's a movement in general towards this. My experience would say that there's a movement in general towards it, but maybe Nintendo are being a bit stricter about it. I
would say, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, because Nintendo has always been very, very eagle-eyed as to how developers use their hardware and how they design games to work with their hardware. And Nintendo has always...
With the Wii, there was a bit of a shovelware problem.
Okay, fair. I'm speaking less in terms of general quality and more how the software interacts with the hardware, because one of the things that they've been very focused on is the player experience and making it as easy and painless as possible. So it would not surprise me in the least if there was some edict from Nintendo that says, okay, if you're going to develop for the Switch, you have to have a game that can work right out of the box. Which also kind of an unrelated note, this is also why I made those cracks about why Street Fighter V would never come to a Nintendo console, because Nintendo would look at it and go, no, you're missing half a game here.
Yeah.
So
they also don't seem to assume that you will have a 100% reliable and available net connection, which for a Japanese company seems weird. It's great, don't get me wrong, the fact that they don't assume that, but considering, as far as I can tell, 99.9% of Japan is plugged in 99.9% of the time. Please correct me if I'm wrong on this.
Yeah, based on my studies, they're apparently one step away from the Matrix over there. But now something else that I want to bring up as far as software development for the Switch is another area in which the Switch has been a roaring success is in the indie market.
Yes.
We've indie gaming on consoles has been a thing for a couple generations now. It got started with the Xbox 360 and the PS3 and kind of picked up steam with the Xbox One and the PS4. But it's really on the Switch that indie gaming, I think Nintendo is the first console company I can say has really thrown their weight 100% behind indie gaming, because there are so many awesome indie titles in the Nintendo eShop. I think the last count that somebody gave me was like there's over like 2,000 indie titles available through the Nintendo eShop. Once you take away all the first party, they're coming fast and furious. Wow. There's a guy on YouTube named I can't remember his real name, but his channel is called Beat 'em Ups. I think Woodhawks, I think is his real name or something. But he puts out like 3 or 4 videos a week just talking about Switch eShop games that he's picked up. And these are games that they've been available on Steam for yonks, but they're really starting to find to find their success on the Switch. And these are games that I would not have heard of otherwise. Like I remember having a mini conniption when I read about a game called Blossom Tales coming to the Switch. And I was like, what? It's an indie game that's a send-up of Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, and has the exact same playstyle and presentation. Why have I not heard about this sooner? And the reason is because it was...
Quick question, on a tangent then, have you come across 3D Game Heroes?
I have, yes. I've had a copy for the PlayStation 3 for many years. I'm one of that game's strongest proponents, and I want a sequel, god damn you.
Yeah, I have it on my shelf.
But that's a discussion for a different table. But yes. There's so many games, indie games, that are finding success on the Switch. And I want to ask, do you think that the reason some of these indie games are finding such huge success is because the Switch is a new shop front? It doesn't have the same size and selection as, say, something like Steam or good old games? Or do you think maybe it's because Nintendo is throwing actual support behind indie developers?
I'm pretty certain that Nintendo was throwing material support behind indie developers. I can't say for 100% certain, but I'm pretty sure. Especially considering that there have been people like Limited Run Games have been able to do physical editions of these tiny indie games.
Which I have not been able to buy because those things sell out in 5 minutes.
Yep. Also,
the joke I've heard is that it's easier to get tickets to PAX than it is a game from Limited Run Games.
One really peculiar thing about Limited Run Games is it's actually easier to order stuff from them if you are in the UK, because you will see it as soon as it goes up.
One more thing that I think you and I need to sit down and work out a deal over. And it's not just that they're getting digital releases, it's like you said, they're getting physical releases too.
Yeah. So I'm pretty certain that there must be material support in there somewhere, if that's even possible. But the other thing is, and the thing that Steam, for example, does not do, is that there's curation going on. They aren't just letting any old shit on there. You have to pass a process.
Which again, is Nintendo's history of being very tightly controlling as to what goes on their console and how it interacts with the hardware.
I've seen people complain about the whole, the Nintendo Seal of Quality thing that has gone back to the 80s, and how this can stifle smaller developers who maybe have problems meeting these requirements. On the other hand, you've got the torrent of shit that's on Steam. It's I forget what the law is. The 99% of everything is terrible. That's certainly true of Steam at the moment. But it's not true of the Switch shop.
Yeah, and there's wisdom, I think, in both approaches. But I think in its own way, when you're talking about an indie shop for a console, you have to have that kind of curation, because just based on memory limitations alone, we're talking about a console that I think has 32 gigabytes of storage out of the box, somewhere, maybe not even that.
32 gig. Without expansion.
Yeah, so there's definitely for memory limitations alone, you have to make sure that you're not selling a bunch of cruft just so that you're not wasting space on the console. Whereas with a PC, I mean, hell, multiple terabyte hard drives are fucking falling from the sky nowadays. You can get, I mean, I just bought a 3 terabyte hard drive for the Beast that cost me only $6. So Steam having, a much more laxer policy is not so much an issue on the PC as it would be on the console.
I also wonder, because if you download a game that breaks your PC, you can wipe that and reinstall Windows.
Yeah.
If something bricks your console, you're having to send that back to the manufacturers.
Yeah, and now, thankfully, we have. I don't think we've ever seen something like that happen. Not just on the Switch, but on any console. Well, then that's news to me.
It has for a console. Yes, it has. The errors have usually been caught very, very quickly on very early. There's the sort of thing where the errors are only on the very first editions of the games, which are subsequently recalled.
Okay.
I'm entirely failing to remember any specific examples, but I do, because I did an episode for my show on Radio Sega about glitches, and I did see a actual console breaker. I think it was for the
the closest that I
for the Mega CD, I think. that was recalled very, very quickly.
The closest example that I can think of is when LA Noire first came out. I remember the PS3 version had an issue where it was causing the CD drive to spin too fast and overheat, and it was in some cases causing the CD to shatter inside the drive, which will happen if you spin a CD too fast. Go look it up on YouTube. There's plenty of video.
It's quite terrifying as
well. But again, I think that, going back to what we're saying, I think that's again that I've never heard of that happening on a Nintendo console. I think that goes back to Nintendo being hyper vigilant on making sure that the software that's on their consoles will actually work. Now, this isn't to say that the Switch is perfect. There are certainly some issues that need to be addressed. Some of those are just subjective from person to person, but there are some other issues, some things that we have been waiting for a while that we haven't heard anything on. And one of those things that I want to bring up is something that you brought up earlier with the Joy-Cons, and how you were asking if they were ergonomic. I love playing my Switch on the go when I have the Joy-Cons plugged into the slotted into the console, but I cannot use them any other way. If I'm playing, like, say for example, I want to have a friend over and play Mario Kart, I can't do it where you have each person using one Joy-Con, because I have, as I've said many times in the show, I have big meaty man hands. I have giant fingers, big sausage fingers, and if I use one of those Joy-Cons on its own with the little thing slotted on it for the L and R buttons, I mean, I'll have early onset arthritis before the end of the gaming session, because that was just hurt my fucking hands. And I can't even use the Joy-Cons slotted into the little controller holder that comes with the console that you slot the Joy-Cons into to play the Switch on your TV. I have to use a Pro controller if I'm playing on my television.
So I have tiny little baby paws, so I find the controller holder is actually the most comfortable way I find to play. Holding it kind of horizontally, I don't really have that much of a problem with. I have occasionally had, if I'm having to use the touchscreen a lot and switch between holding it in one hand, occasionally that hurts, but that's just because I have tiny, tiny paws.
That's something I keep forgetting the Switch has, is a touchscreen.
Yeah,
because I use it so little.
When I was when I came down with labyrinthitis the other week, I started playing Pokemon Quest, the stupid little Pokemon pick up and put down game. And that's mostly controlled by touchscreen, so you do end up using it quite a bit there.
So, so the controllers are kind of wonky depending on person to person. The other thing, and this is the big one, and this is the one that I think people are kind of frustrated with Nintendo with because we've heard so little from them on it, is when and if we're going to get any kind of online service, especially the Virtual Console.
There's another problem that's a known fault.
What's that?
The left Joy-Con fault. If you just type that into Google.
That got fixed on.
It did get fixed on subsequent releases, but there's still quite a few of them kicking about. They didn't do a full recall, and some people are saying that they probably should have.
Okay.
There's some people have reported problems with the accelerometers and gyroscopes in some of the Joy-Cons as well. I can't confirm if that's actually a known issue or not.
Okay.
But yeah, apparently, bizarrely though, the left Joy-Con issue was actually, you could fix it with, I think it was like, it was insulation foam, or what was it? I'll look this up now. Conductive foam. You could fix the problem with the Joy-Con having a weak Bluetooth signal with a piece of conductive foam. You know what we were saying about, like, finding random crap and making a geeky use of it? There you go!
All right. And then while we're on the subject of hardware faults, there have been reports recently of the Switch casing itself starting to crack, and the overriding theory about that is that it's being caused by overheating. Although
I would say that's almost certainly the case.
Yeah.
The fact that it's been such a hot summer across most of the world is probably not helping.
Well, and also all the cracks are showing up on the top of the console, and that's where the cooling vent is right on the top. And a lot of the cracks are showing up in and around that cooling vent. But the other thing that, again, is something that I think that people are getting kind of frustrated with is we keep hearing about they're going to have an online service, but Nintendo has yet to tell us what's going to be contained on it. And there's also been some statements that have been made that imply that they might not be doing the virtual console with this console generation. Now, my personal take on that is, and this is something I think a lot of people tend to forget, the virtual console as a concept, that was just branding. So when I think they said that they weren't going to be doing the virtual console this generation, I don't think Nintendo meant that they weren't going to be bringing their older library to the Switch at all. I think what they meant was that they're not going to be bringing back the virtual console brand, that they might be doing something different. Like I've heard theories that they're going to have their own version of PlayStation Now, where you'll be able to stream the older games to the Switch.
I happen to have heard through my boss's contacts that they're almost certainly going to go for a game streaming service that you pay a subscription fee to, a la PlayStation Now or whatever the Xbox One is.
Yeah, because on both the Wii and the Wii U, the Virtual Console was a cash cow, and I don't think Nintendo would just abandon that. That would be just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But it's that they're...
ask them to do something that dumb, though.
Huh?
They have done phenomenally stupid things like that in the past.
That is true. But now, that does kind of bring up sort of a weird quandary, though, with the last couple generations, like the Wii and the Wii U, and that's how would you handle those console generations on this new retro service? Because less so with the Wii U, but certainly with the Wii, it was very dependent on the motion controls. And I haven't had a chance to play anything that uses the Switch's motion controls, so I don't really have a basis for comparison myself. But as I understand it, there are some feature sets that were on the Wii remote and nunchuck that aren't present on the Switch. So my question is would they bring back, say, like Mario Galaxy or other first-party Wii games to the Switch, and how would they make that work on the current hardware?
I'm pretty sure that all the functions that are either not there or different. I think most of the functions that were on the Wii U and the Wii remote and the nunchuck, you'd have to do some tweaking, but most of them should be able to be ported over. The only ones you're going to have real problems with are the ones that use other external accessories like the Wii Fit board or something like that.
Yeah.
To use a similar example, it's similar to in Kingdom Hearts when they moved Dream Drop Distance from the 3DS to the PS4. A lot of the touchscreen controls were changed and either mapped to a button or put on the touchpad in a different way.
Well, that's assuming
I'm pretty sure it's overcomable, but there will have to be tweaking done.
And that's assuming they even bring Wii and Wii U games to the Switch in an online service. The overriding theory that I'm hearing is that the GameCube will be the latest console to be represented on that service.
That's what I've heard, and I've heard that even then a lot of GameCube stuff won't be there. The most You might see a couple of big GameCube titles, but other than that, they're likely gonna be mostly going up to N64 era. So you might see GoldenEye, which
would be fun. But again, it's just, Nintendo's just been so frustratingly vague about this whole thing, and that was one of the big disappointments. We didn't cover this when we did the E3 show, but that was one of the big disappointments I had with Nintendo's presentation, was they didn't tell us anything about the online service, which is supposed to be coming out later this year, and we're already...
Rumor has it that's because there's been a lot of argument between the various different Nintendo regions about exactly how it's going to be implemented.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
And the other big issue that I have on the online front with Nintendo is how the eShop is handled. It's fine now, Well, that's a bit of a blank statement. Let me clarify. It's fine if you want to go into the eShop looking for recent releases, new stuff, or top sellers, but if you're going in looking for something specific, it's very frustrating to try and dig in and go looking for something, a little more specific than just, okay, what's the top seller or what came out last week. And it's sort of a problem that I've said with Steam. It's that if you go into the eShop just looking to float along the surface and just kind of pick what's floating at the top, that's great. But if you want to dig down any deeper, their search tools and such are very limited, and it's very difficult to go looking for something specific. Like, the only way that I was able to buy Blossom Tales, heard about it, was I had to go search for it specifically in the search bar and search for it by name. I couldn't pick like, okay, show me your RPG titles, show me your action titles, show me your side scroller titles. You can't search by things like genre or game type, and that's
which, considering that the Nintendo came up with some of the genre titles, that's kind of ironic.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating because, and especially when we go back to what we were talking about, that's the indie titles. If you don't know that a game is on the Nintendo eShop, it may as well just not exist, because you're not going to find it any other way besides going in there looking for it, unless it's something that came out in the last few days or it's, a mega popular top seller.
At least they have a search function, which, working in the industry I do and owning an Oculus Rift, the Oculus Rift store up until earlier this year didn't have a search function at all.
Yeah, I think I bought most of my Oculus games on Steam. I think the only one that I bought over the Oculus store was, what was it? It was Robo Recall, and that was only because it came with the touch controllers. Came with it, yeah. So Nintendo really needs to step back and re-examine how they handle their online store, because it's very frustrating if you want to go looking deeper into their catalog beyond just what's at the surface. So they really need to and I'm really hoping that they can get it. They have some wiggle room now, because the Switch is only, I think, a year and a few months old, so there's not a whole bunch of stuff there that it would cause a problem. But if they keep going at the rate that they are, it's going to become a very serious issue, I'd say, within the next year, if they keep up their release schedule as quick as it is. So, that's about all the gripes that I have for the Switch so far. Skyblaze, do you have any others?
Nope, don't think so.
Okay. Well, I guess since we're coming close to the end of our show, let's wrap it up by talking about, of course, the most important thing about the Switch. That's the games. What are some games that you've really been loving on the Switch, and what are some that you're really looking forward to? So
I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Axiom Verge. Actually, it's very much a ye-old Metroidvania game. The story is surprisingly deep for that style of game as well. There's a lot of story packed into not a great deal of space. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 I thought was absolutely brilliant. I'm looking forward to the DLC that's coming out, Torn of the Golden Country. I really
call it
enjoy
DLC if it's getting a physical release.
Okay, expansion. Please yourself. I poke my tongue out at you. Where was I? Oh yeah, I actually really enjoyed Pokemon Quest. I know it's stupid, but I think it's cute, and it makes me happy when I'm feeling very poorly. I don't actually have that many games for the Switch yet. I will probably fix that over time, but I haven't had it very long, so.
Okay. What's something coming out that you're looking forward to?
That's a good question. Upcoming Switch video games. The World Ends With You. It's the World Ends With You, the re-release.
Yeah, it's getting a re-release on the Switch.
I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to play that properly.
Okay.
I probably should get hold of Octopath Traveler.
Well, good luck.
Yeah.
if you want it physically, it is available on the shop.
I'm not really that bothered about a physical release. Valkyria Chronicles 4. I'd quite like to play that. I know my other half would like to play Smash Brothers Ultimate, because of course he would.
You may find you may find me heated competition come December.
He's that guy. You know how you've always got like one friend who spends all their time unlocking all the characters and then they're too good for anybody else to beat them? That's him.
That's me too.
Oh, well, you knock yourselves out then, I will sit there and laugh.
Oh, okay. Has there been any game that's really surprised you?
I have to say Pokemon Quest a bit, because I was like, I am playing this purely to pass the time while feeling like crap. And this has actually sucked me in. As it was clearly designed to do, but it still sucked me in.
Okay. Well, let's see. In my library, I'm currently back and forth between Octopath Traveler and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I'm both really enjoying. I am also looking forward to the expansion later this year. I have also just now received a text that my physical copy of Sonic Mania Plus has arrived, so as soon as we're finished here, I will be dashing to the front door for that. Want to go back to, you were talking about Axiom Verge, which is another game that I really enjoyed on the Switch, and if you're looking for another really fun Metroidvania-style game, pick up the tie-in game for the Mummy movie that came out a couple years ago, The Mummy Demastered. I know it sounds counterintuitive given how bad that movie was, but the game is actually really fun. It's actually a really fun Metroidvania style game, and one of the things I love about it is that if you die, you don't just reload your last save, you actually start playing as a new character, and you have to retrieve all of your equipment from your now zombified former self.
Oh, roguelike style. Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, in that sense, yeah, but it's not like the map resets every time you play. There is a set map. But yeah, that's so it creates this kind of situation where it's like, great, I now have to go kill my former self who has a fucking rocket launcher, and all I've got is the piddly starting rifle. So that, and because I was really surprised by Doom 2016. Don't know if I'll pick up New Colossus. So because I don't know, we'll see. Games I'm looking forward to. Pretty much all of my E3 pre-orders for Switch games. Really looking forward to Smash Ultimate, of course. I've got Let's Go Pikachu on my pre-order list. I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm also I've got Axiom, which I've already played through. And then I recently picked up, talking about indie titles that got a physical release, I picked up Max: The Curse of Brotherhood, which is a really fun little game. It's a really fun little platformer. Very charming visual style, great controls, and just a really fun game. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the Switch, in my Switch library that I've really enjoyed. So my Switch collection has grown very quickly because I just absolutely love being able to play these games on the go. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I was looking forward to the next main series Pokemon title, which we're supposed to get next year. And I'm really excited to see where they take the franchise now that it's actually on a dedicated console. Oh, for God's sakes, please don't have your multiplayer component be like that stupid fucking Plaza that you had in Sun and Moon.
Oh god, that really irritated me.
All right. But that's about all the time that we have for Third Power this week. So let's just start wrapping things up by giving just our final thoughts on the Switch and its past year. So Skyblaze, how do you think the Switch performed this year, and what do you think the future holds for it?
I think it's been a bit of a dark horse. I think it's done astonishingly well, all things taken into consideration. And I think everybody's starting to realise that now and, quietly put money on it. So I have this feeling it's going to end up being kind of the second place candidate after the PS4. So the runnings are going to be kind of PS4, Nintendo Switch, and somewhere back there, there's the Xbox One. Looking lonely.
Yeah, we can do a whole show on how disappointing the Xbox One has been. At least for me. I don't know about you.
I do not have Microsoft consoles in my house. Microsoft have pissed me off enough over the years.
Fair enough. But yeah, I'm in total agreement. Like, the Switch has just been a total surprise. Like pretty much any Nintendo console it's always going to do its own thing and always kind of come out of left field to some extent. And I really think that it's something special. And I don't know if I'm not prepared at this juncture to say that it is a herald of the future of the industry. But it's definitely shaking things up, and I'm really fascinated to see what Nintendo does in the future. Just for God's sakes, give us some kind of virtual console style service, whether it's we're buying the games or if you're doing a streaming service. Just give us something. I want to be able to play my retro games on the go. So, yeah, that's all the time that we have for Nerd of the Third Power this week. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We will see you guys next week. As always, I'm Dr. Gonzo.
I'm Skyboys.
We will see you next week. Taka, play us out.